Alan Lazaros, welcome to the Superhuman Life, brother.
Thank you for having me. I really am excited about this. It's clear you take your platform seriously, and that means the world to me.
I really appreciate that, man. Like we were talking beforehand, man. I really think that there's something connection here, and I know that we're gonna drop just tremendous value on the audience. And as we've done really with every show, I always like to kind of set a little bit of context with who we're talking to. You know, give you the chance to kind of intro yourself to these listeners from all over the world. They're gonna be on this journey with us today. So I think that's probably the best place to start, man, because like I was telling you, I love how you view the world. I love how you see things and process, just your thoughts. But I want to get us up into the point because I know obviously this isn't who you were, 5 years, 10 years, 15, like you've had this incredible kind of journey and story. So why don't you kind of walk our audience through that? And I think in doing so, there may be a few times I kind of interject because I want to be able to extract some real value and wisdom for people. But yeah, why don't you kind of share with us, who Alan is and why he's here with us today?
Sounds good. And I want to give you permission to interrupt me if you need to, because I think conversation, even before Kevin and I got together with Next Level University, I had something called Conversations Change Lives. So this conversation right here is going to change your life, change my life, anyone listening's life. It's going to be powerful. So don't be afraid to interrupt me in the middle of my.
Oh, brother, trust me. This is my show. I don't need permission to do anything, but I really appreciate that, man.
Okay, perfect. I love it. All right. So my story starts very, very young. And again, I'm 32 years old. For anyone watching on video, if you do end up posting this video, I look 12. So I'm still hoping for my first kid here. But
so maybe we can get some of those secrets later on towards the end. How do you keep that youthful, look to you? But yeah.
And sounds good. Good sleep and fitness. So early on, I'm 2 years old. And so I often start my story with, I lost something very near and dear to my heart, but I gained something else. And I think that'll be a theme throughout not only this episode, but my life. It has been a theme. So my father passed away. As a matter of fact, yesterday was my father's birthday. And he passed away when I was 2 years old. And my sister and I sent some pictures to each other yesterday, believe it or not, last night, and just said a prayer. But when I was 2 years old, I lost my father. And I say that I lost something near and dear to my heart that, I'll never fully get back. But I've gained something far more powerful, I believe. Two things. Number one, I was raised by two women, my mom and my older sister. My sister's 3 years older than me. And then number two, perspective. So I've personally never had an intellectual understanding of death, but an emotional one. And so I think that's really shaped who I've become. And I think this will make a lot of sense moving forward. So I'm 2 years old. My father passes away. I grow up. I'm raised by two women, my mom and my sister. Now, my mom, I'm 10 years old, and I remember this like it was yesterday. We were driving past WPI. WPI is a school called Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And at the time, my uncle was the track and field coach there. As a matter of fact, since then, the field has been named Norcross Field after my uncle. He's since passed away. And I'm 10 years old, and my mom literally said the following words to me. She said, "Alan, you're really smart. Really smart people go there. You're good at math. You should go there one day." So in hindsight, it's obvious she was planting a dream in my heart. And she always used to try to explain things to me. My sister and I still joke today about how we were never punished. We were lectured, and we hated it at the time. But my mom was always telling us why we were in trouble and wanting us to understand it. Go figure. Now I'm the guy who always wants the deeper understanding, right? So it's a trip. Even though at the time I did hate it, and we would rather just get punished, sent to our room. We don't want to talk for 3 hours. But anyways, so. My mom always taught me things in a way I would understand them. And she said this simple phrase to me that I'll never forget. She said, "Alan, you can be a CEO or you can be a farmer. I'm going to love you either way." And what she told me is that if you're a CEO, you can wake up one day and decide to be a farmer, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around.
I love that.
And so she said, aim high and you'll have choices. Life is about choices. And one of the reasons she taught me that is because she didn't feel like she focused on academics enough, and she wished that she had more choices when her husband had passed away. She had to kind of do whatever she could to survive as a single woman raising two kids without letting free. Go ahead.
Did your mom ever remarry, or was she dating at the time, like seriously dating? And I'm asking this because once again, your perspective, I talked about it, you shared perspective as well. You said it, like you lost something very near and dear, but it was also a blessing kind of at the same time because you were raised by women. The reason I'm asking about remarrying and if there was maybe a male figure in your life is because of, the real problem in the world through fatherlessness. I think, so many people growing up without a dad, they're like, oh, I'm a victim because I don't have a dad. I was never shown what it was to be a man. I mean, you're a shining example right here of what a man in today's world can ultimately become. I mean, heart-centered, visionary, entrepreneur vision, just having real impact. So curious, just like, was there a male influence on your life early on?
I really appreciate that question, and I couldn't agree more. What's interesting is that and one day I plan to tell two stories, right? I plan to tell, I'll be on stage one day. I have this vision. It could be 30 years from now, and I'm going to tell one story from the pessimistic point of view of but it's true. It's going to be the truth, but it's going to be the darker truth. And then I'm going to tell it from the optimistic point of view, and I'm going to say, listen, both of those stories are true, but I chose the second one. And so to answer your question, I could have used not having a father as the reason why I was X, Y, or Z. But believe it or not, I actually used me not having a father as the reason why I believe I have an advantage. Because being raised by women, not having to put up that masculine front, being able to learn how to be vulnerable and communicate and focus on relationships. Because I'm a strong masculine energy by nature. Everybody still says that I look like John. My dad's name's John, and that I act like him. But I was nurtured by the feminine. And I think that's created this tremendous advantage where even in corporate America, I was working with the engineers. The left hemisphere of the brain is the cold, calculating, strategic, numbers, mathematical, structured, disciplined, consistent side of the brain. And then on the right side, you've got the warm, loving, intuitive, creative, passion, purpose-driven mind. And I think that the two hemispheres of the brain, how well do you dance between them and integrate them? I feel like I've had an advantage in hindsight living on both sides and learning how to communicate effectively. I used to talk to the engineers and the marketers and vice versa. And that's still been a common theme of bridging that gap. But to answer your original question, I did have a stepdad. So one of my father's close friends, my mom and him had gotten together through that tragedy, and they started to connect at a deep level through that loss, and then something blossomed there. So I did have a stepdad for 13 years. Believe it or not, I talked to him a few years ago, and I still have I plan on reaching out to him at some point, and so I'm glad this is happening. This is kind of synchronistic because in my story and in your research, you probably have never heard that. I still think there's some unresolved traumas and challenges there that I'm still working through. And so, I often tell people, the suppression of self-expression leads to depression. So you got to express your truth to yourself consistently and to others. But if it's an open wound, try hard not to do that publicly yet until you work through some of that stuff. And so I'm not necessarily going to go down that road yet just because I have some unresolved stuff. But I did have a stepdad for 13 years. I'm still trying to figure out some of the nuances of what did and did not rub off on me. But what I will say that I think is valuable to your listeners is that we all have a story, and that every time you increase your awareness in life, and I'll give an example of this, The 5 Love Languages by Gretchen Rubin. I believe Gary Chapman. When I read that book, I all of a sudden had to reprocess all of my past relationships, intimate relationships, from this new awareness of like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that quality time, words of affirmation, gift giving. I realized that I was doing love and giving love, but in a way that the other person wasn't receiving it. It wasn't their love language. And so the point I'm making here is that whenever you do gain a new awareness, I want everyone listening to understand that you're going to have to reprocess your past, and your mind will start doing this automatically, by the way. So try to be optimistic. You'll reprocess your entire past from a higher sense of awareness. And that's something that I'm currently in the process of doing, because the more I learn and grow, the more I reprocess my past from this higher sense of awareness and then reinvest it in my future.
Got it. That's amazing. And first off, man, thank you for sharing what you did. I know I mean, I could clearly see that because you said it, that you're still processing some of this. And I just appreciate you for being open and vulnerable with the bits that you did share. But I think there's a lesson in that for everybody listening. People will hear, they hear these podcasts, they see somebody like Alan, 500 shows of the hyperconscious, now next level universe. They see him on stages talking. They hear, Frank here with the Superhuman life, all over the world, changing people's lives, impacting things. I've overcome quite a bit of struggles, and we're going to talk about some of the struggles in your life that you've had to overcome. But even with all that, even sitting here today, 500 episodes in, multiple six figures in your business, you're still dealing with stuff. You're still processing things that you haven't yet got all the answers for. So that just shows everybody out there, no matter where you are, what you're going through, you see these people, on social media, see them on the billboards, this, that, they're going through issues just as much as you are. And many times as you work up that ladder of success, the issues get bigger and bigger and bigger because your responsibilities grow in shape. So thank you for that, man. I think that there's a tremendous lesson in what you just shared there. But I so resonate with the masculine feminine piece. I don't know if you've read the book Iron John by Robert Bly. It's a book I think every man needs to read, but he talks about, in order to become fully man, you must become a woman first. And he's obviously talking in philosophical terms, but it's getting so in tune with our feminine side, getting so in tune with our feminine nature until we fully understand that part. Not till then can we become a full man.
Otherwise, you'll be running from it your whole life.
So true.
And the greatest strength is admitting your greatest weakness. And
Amen.
I think and I didn't know that early on either, because I put up this front of like, I need to be the best. I was hiding from my own pain rather than accepting it and then healing from it so that I can use it to transform myself and others. And so that's why I want to tell those two stories one day, is like, I could have chosen this other story and stayed locked in that I didn't have a dad and that's why this, and this, versus the opposite of I decided to face that truth. And my reverence for life, I think, is amplified because I understand that, life is short, and I don't go through life with the facade that it's going to be forever.
So good. So yeah, let's get back to, to your story and go through there. So 10 WPI, you need to go there. You're incredible at math, Alan. You're a smart guy. I love you if you're a doctor or a farmer, but remember, if you're a doctor, you can always choose to be a farmer. If you're a farmer, chances are you're not going to be able to live the life as a doctor. So the lesson there is aim high, because you can always kind of downgrade from there. So continue on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're going to go right back into it. And one caveat I want to say is that, let's say you are a CEO and then decide to be a farmer. It's easy to do that kind of more overnight. But if you are a farmer, you can still be a CEO, but there's a compound effect there. You can't just suddenly like, oh, I'm just going to decide to be a CEO, right?
Yeah.
Putting in that work. So I'm 10 years old. My mom plants that seed going to WPI. Fast forward, and it's 8th grade. And my mom took an interesting chance, man. And kudos to her for this, because this took courage. She said, Alan, I'm going to let you take 8th grade off if you promise me that you'll get straight A's in high school. She wanted me to get what's referred to as the President's Award. The President's Award, I have a plaque on my wall at home. And it's signed by George Bush, the one who was president in the early 2000s.
Junior.
And George Bush Jr. Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And so I ended up getting that. But prior to that, she said, you can take 8th grade off. And so if you look at my academic career, man, it's literally A's and a couple B's all the way up to 8th grade. And then it's C's and D's, man. And then in high school, it is straight A's. I got 1 B+ in honors English. God damn it. And then
So when she said take it off, she meant like, just, you don't have to do your homework. You don't have to try. I'm like, she let you just not go to school for 8th grade. How did you even get? Because I know that there's a rule, like you got to pass a certain test to move on. So
I was busy farming. No. Yeah. So she meant take it off, as in like be more lackadaisical. Don't worry so much, which was huge courage. And by the way, in hindsight, it hurt me to get into the honors courses, because it's like, what happened, Alan? Right. But anyways, so I crush it in high school, man. Just absolutely crushed it academically. And that's in hindsight where I found a lot of significance, is like being really, really, really smart. So it's my junior year, I believe, tail end of my junior year. And it's 1:00 in the morning, and my mom and I are writing my essay for WPI, like together. And she's helping me with it. And it was fire essay. And it's actually, in hindsight, it's interesting because I was in the essay, I'm talking about the story where she said the CEO farmer thing. So what a trip that this is.
Yeah.
First time I realized that ever. So anyways, we're doing that. I get in, man. I get in. It's awesome. I go there and it's all left-brained engineer types, mostly male. It was 75% male at that time. Just people who, I mean, when I say the most brilliant minds in the world, like I'm telling you, it's like unbelievable the conversations I was able to have with these people. Most of them work at like Apple and or YouTube, Google, DraftKings, all these amazing companies. But anyways, so what I used to do is I used to, again, conversations change lives. I used to actually facilitate effective debates with my friends because I wanted to get sharp minds sharpening each other. And so I would be there like asking questions and then getting them to debate with each other and then seeing both sides of the coin. And again, in hindsight's 2020, I just thought this was so wonderful. And I think learning's always been a theme for me. But anyway, so I graduate college with an electrical and computer engineering degree with high distinction. Again, very academically focused. I go into corporate America. Now, in corporate America, I worked for a bunch of different companies, dude, did a lot of soul searching. So iRobot was one of them, a little company, software company called Oz Development. I worked for Lens Americas, Tyco Safety Products, a company called Sensata Technologies. I did, it used to be Texas Instruments, so that company. Then eventually I landed at a company called Cognex. Now, Cognex sold industrial automation equipment into manufacturing facilities. I started an inside sales team there, eventually got promoted to outside sales, and then it was my job to be an electrical, or basically a sales engineer for all of Western New England. So Vermont, all of Connecticut, Western Mass, that whole territory. So, for example, Frito-Lay was one of my big customers. So I'm traveling a bunch. I forget the exact, it's either 2015 or 2014. I think 2015. It was a horrible winter where there was so much snow. It was like multiple snowstorms in New England, 3 feet of snow, like repeatedly. And I remember the signs were like covered with snow. So I'm up in New Hampshire with my little cousin and just kind of hating my life at this point because I'm traveling all over the place. There's potholes everywhere. And all I did was save money, try to get out of college debt. I ended up paying off 84 grand worth of debt in 1 year, which was really cool. And I'm driving a Volkswagen Passat. And I'm up there with my little cousin. We were playing Call of Duty earlier, and then we were going to TGI Fridays. And I'm looking down at the GPS, and I look down for 2 seconds, and then I look up, and I'm on the wrong side of the road. So there's this fork in the road that the road actually stayed right. I thought it stayed left. I end up on the wrong side of the road, and I see the brightest lights I'd ever seen. Now, for those of you who have ever been in a life or death situation, you know this feeling, because I literally had that moment of, this is it. Like, there's no way I survived this. Now, I'm 26 at the time. Okay. Now, my father passed away when he was 28 in a car accident. And so this messed with me big time, man. So fortunately, I'm driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat, like I said, and I used to call it the tank. Really heavy duty, German engineered car, just a really steel trap. And so fortunately, both airbags go off. My cousin and I are fine. He hurt his knee a bit. I hurt my face on the airbag, but I'm sitting in an armchair drinking whiskey, questioning absolutely everything. I'm reprocessing all of my past of like, that could have been it, just like my dad. And so all these regrets, man, that's really what it was. It was just a lot of regret. Now, I've always had, I believe, really pure intentions, but my approach, right? It's like that Aristotle quote. It's like, we'll go do the right thing. It's like, okay, but who can do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons at the right time, in the right amount with the right people, right? Now I understand. Whereas before I was definitely trying to do the right thing, but I definitely had some vices and, wasn't healing from my past traumas. And again, hindsight's 2020. This is an evolutionary growth. But I had so much regret. And so there's this quote that I say that I think can be really powerful for everybody. You can't see the stars during the day. They're always there, but sometimes it takes the darkness to see clearly that which you simply could not within the light. And what that really means is when you have that dark night where you're lonely and in emotional pain, you're going to see something you never saw before. It's going to wake you up to something or someone you never realized before. And so in that pain, if you cannot escape it, AKA if you can sit in the pain rather than escaping into Netflix or drugs or alcohol or porn, any sort of vice, if you can sit in it, really just sit in it to learn about yourself, I'm telling you that star will appear. For me, there was 2 stars that appeared. One was a book by Bronnie Ware called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, which I highly recommend everyone read. To this day, literally 6 years later, I'm 32 now, I was 26 at the time. And I have a flashcard in my pocket with all 5 regrets, and we can go through those if you'd like. But this is Bronnie's work, and I actually got to interview her on the podcast, which was so cool. 4 years later, by the way, she said, "Alan, I love about you is that you're persistent but also patient." So, anyways, the second thing that I heard and saw, the star that I saw, Tony Robbins' TED Talk. Have you seen Tony Robbins' TED Talk?
I don't think I've seen his TED Talk. I don't know if you can see behind me. There's a whole collection of Tony. Oh, it's on the bookshelf that you can't see. I mean, Tony was the first self-development, personal growth coach, whatever, that I got into back. I think I was 20 years old the first time I read Awaken the Giant. I mean, he has been in my ear, in my eyes, reading, listening for almost 2 decades now. I mean, he has shaped so much about my entire mindset. But I've probably seen the TED Talk, but I can't recall it off the top of my head.
I highly recommend you go give it another listen, dude. Every time I need a pick me up, I read that TED Talk is like such truth. You know, he and you know, obviously, right? So he's been around so many people, patterns become obvious. His understanding of the human condition is just so, that TED Talk is just absolute fire. So what he says to everyone in that TED Talk is explore your own inner web. And so I had all this regret and I sat in the pain and I didn't escape it. And it messed with me for a while. I mean, double yellow lines messed with me for a while. I kept getting pulled over by police because I was too far on the right side of the road. They were very kind to me, though, because I basically said I just got in a tough car accident where I was on the wrong side of the road. So bear with me. I was claustrophobic for a time. So PTSD is a thing for sure. But post-traumatic growth is also a thing. And so that was my deep dive into personal development, man. And again, you know, growing up with my father's death created a lot of challenges, pain, and suffering in my environment that I, without personal development, I don't feel like I had the tools to overcome. When I found personal development, man, I went all in. I was like, this is the key. This is it. This is like the way. And from that moment on, I've been all in. And I'll tell you what, you know, I've had some tough days since then, but I know that I'm not living with regret anymore. And so the number one regret of the dying by Bronnie Ware. Quick backstory. She worked in hospice for 8 years. She thought her job was to take care of the terminally ill, like wipe them and stuff like that. What her real job was to listen. They all said, I wish, I wish, I wish. She noticed these patterns. Like everyone has the same regrets. At the end of their life, they have the same regrets. The number one regret, I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. The second regret, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I got to ask her. I said, is that because of number one, though? I think it's because of number one. Because I love hard work, but I didn't when I wasn't in alignment. Like, yeah, that makes sense. I said, not to impose on your work, but I think that's because of number one, Bronnie, right?
What did she say to that? Did she?
Yeah, she literally was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Alan. Which I was very, if you listen to the episode, I think it was like 190 or something like that. I was very fanboyish. But I was like tiptoeing because I didn't want to impose on her work. But I was like, Bronnie, I don't think number 2 is fully complete yet, right? Out of your top 5 regrets of the dying, the book that's changed the world, like number 2 needs work, Bronnie, right? So it's just an interesting thing. But anyways, number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my true feelings. This is something that I think a lot of guys have trouble with. Number 4, I wish I had kept in touch with my friends. And then number 5 is that I wish I had let myself be happier, like allowed myself to be happier, giving myself permission. Yeah,
it's so important to pay attention to the way that she phrases these, though, the actual words, like, because a lot of people will gloss over 5. I wish I let myself be happier, and they'd be, oh, she wishes she would have been happier. Well, what could she have done to be? No. It's not I wish I was happier. It's wish I let myself be happy. Because once again, this gets back to, I think, the theme of everything that, you know, we've already discussed and where we're going to continue to go, your perspective of how you're looking at your situations, of how you're looking at your circumstances. Are you taking the pessimistic route? I didn't grow up without a dad, so I'm a victim with this and I'm never going to become a real man. Or are you taking the optimistic approach, realizing that without the masculine dominant role there, I could get more in touch with my feminine. As long as I don't lean too hard over here, I'm going to be able to balance that too. And it's still something that you're struggling with, or working through today. So very, very important to pay attention to how she phrases those. I think, I love one of the things Gary Vaynerchuk talks about a lot. Like, obviously I know you're familiar with Gary. I'm not sure how much of a fan, but he talks all the time about, you want to change your perspective, go spend time, in an older person's home or in a hospital. Just spend time, go there as a volunteer and just spend a couple hours there and just listen, like Bronny did. Listen to what these people are saying. There's so much wisdom that can be drawn out of somebody that's at the end of their life.
So much wisdom, because that's the thing, right? There's a book by Lucius Seneca. He talks about, it's called On the Shortness of Life. Have you read that one?
I haven't. No.
It's unreasonable, and he basically says we treat ourselves like we are mortals in all that we fear, but immortal in all that we desire. And it's this interesting thing of like, what if you flip the script? What if you treat yourself as more powerful in all that you fear and overcoming it, but yet also understand that, listen, I have a limited amount of time. It's time to step up. The regrets I had, man, were wasted time. At the end of my speeches, I have this whole poem that I go through by Les Brown, and I have it all recited, or memorized. But at the end of it, I said, after the poem, I don't want you to have an easy life. I don't wish for you to have an easy life, but a deeply meaningful one. Because I think that one of the biggest misconceptions in the world is this idea that easy is better. I think that's honestly bullshit, personally. And I'm sorry if I swore on your show, if I'm not allowed.
It's okay.
I don't know if that this whole idea of, one of the questions I ask my clients regularly is, where are you chasing pleasure at the expense of fulfillment? And the reason why I think the harder road, or the more challenging road, I'll say, is the better road, is because that's where you grow. And when you grow, like Tony says, you can then contribute. And we have this weird part of our human nature that wants it to be easier. But it's like when Jim Rohn says, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. I genuinely believe that. You look at people who had the easiest life and they're not fulfilled, man. They're not proud of who they've become. Diamonds are created by pressure. And I think that that's one golden nugget that I've never fully been able to explain. It's like, I know this sounds weird, but I actually don't want an easy life. If I wanted an easy life, man, I wouldn't be here today. Like, you know how easy it would have been for me to stay at my old job and make six figures? Like, I was rolling financially. That was the easier way. I chose to carve my own unique path that has been far more challenging, but also far more rewarding. And so it's that cliche thing of the toughest climbs lead to the best views, but it's absolutely true.
Well, so many people understand this part on the physical side of things. I mean, we're talking to an audience, I shared with you kind of, where the listeners have come from. A lot of them have been with me over the years and followed the fitness journey. And maybe they've come here from muscle transformation or massetic muscle, whatever it was. So we understand that if we're going to change something physically, if we're going to grow a muscle, we got to go through some pain of the reps. Arnold talks about, the pump being the greatest sensation in the world, but that you got to go through that pain of discomfort to grow your muscle. If you want to get absolutely shredded, and you can talk to this as a physique competitor as well, you want to get absolutely shredded, you have to go through some pain of low caloric restriction. You have to go through some pain of doing cardio at times when you just don't have the energy. So from the physical standpoint, we understand that, we process it, but it's something about the barrier of just how we see the world to realize, like, all these same principles that to change our physique, the same principles apply to changing our life. The same principles apply to changing our mindset. The same principles apply to changing our life out of an addiction, but there's something in the mindset. So do you have something that maybe you help with your clients as you're walking them through the initial process of how to get, out of their own heads and just see this from the right perspective? I don't know if I asked that question the right way, but I think you got it.
I do. I got you. And this, again, it's very challenging to go against your human nature. I think the path of least resistance is evolutionarily programmed into us because of, there's a book by Daniel Lieberman called The Story of the Human Body. It talks about when we were hunter-gatherers, like literally, you know, your cognitive function takes up 25% of your daily caloric intake. And if you're constantly challenged, it takes up more caloric intake. And so back in those days, we had a biological imperative to conserve energy. So it's sloth, right? The seven deadly sins. Sloth is
Mhm.
laziness is programmed into us for a purpose of survival. But sloth is never going to help you thrive. And so, you know, I think this opportunistic hunter part of us understands that, like, if the meat of the hunt is going to refuel and then some with a surplus, then it's worth our time and energy. But we don't apply that same thing to our technological world. And so, you know, one of the other things, right? Gluttony. I think that's a biological imperative too. If there's a lot of food, eat it all now, because what if there's a famine? And so we're being run by a biology that is designed for survival, but not designed for our easy technology world. And
Mm.
so, to answer your original question, number one, it's so hard to explain this. But number two, I've tried my whole life, so I'm going to continue to try right here. All right. I think there's physical, which you just described, where we understand no pain, no gain. And even that one's a struggle, right? No one wants to do cardio at 4 a.m. But
Yeah, everybody's looking for the, let me wrap the thing around my waist and put the oil on because it's going to shred the fat away, or what pill can I pop? So yeah, we're teetering as a society, or teetering as, a population of actually getting out of the no pain, no gain, because we are looking for the pain without the gain. And if the pill doesn't work, let me just go suck the fat off with a vacuum. So yeah, I think we are actually like not 100% sharp on the physical side. So okay, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off here. So you got the physical.
I love that, man. The other thing that I want to tell people too, and anyone listening, you're not going to build self-esteem with plastic surgery necessarily. It's nothing against plastic surgery. Here's the thing: like, those quick fixes are not fulfilling. Pleasure and fulfillment are two different things. Pleasure is, I eat this Oreo and it tastes good, but you're never going to be like, I really wish I ate more Oreos. You know what I mean? It's not fulfilling. It doesn't make you feel good about yourself. Your relationship with yourself is everything. That's something my girlfriend's taught me. And so, if you make promises to do challenging stuff and then you follow through, you're going to have self-esteem. And that self-esteem is going to overflow onto other people. And you're going to have self-love and therefore love for others. And we've all been letting ourselves down so long and then unintentionally hurt a loved one. It's not a good thing. But so physical, you have no pain, no gain. And again, that's the principle, right? If you want to grow, it's going to require discomfort, period. And anyone who argues that knows something that I don't, okay? Or is full of it. All right. Number two, I think physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So one of my old clients and I came up with a framework called the Pmes System. I believe these are the four facets of the human condition: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. If you want to get I remember this one story. I was doing a men's physique competition and I was 2 weeks out and I was so hungry. And I had my coach and then I had another guide, and I texted this other guide who is like a world-class bodybuilder, does really, really well in that industry. You might actually even know his name. It's not Justin Wren. Justin, oh no, I'm forgetting his last name. He was actually Kevin's coach at the time.
Okay.
Justin something. He's shorter, but he's like been on an Olympia stage, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, long story short, I text him and I say, I am struggle bussing right now. Like, I feel terrible. I'm kind of depressed. I'm scared of everything. Like, you get it, right? Peak
Mhm.
week. This is 2 weeks out, granted, but I was just like lean, shredded, but not mentally, emotionally, or spiritually happy. Okay. I said, I need a cheat meal, man. He said, honestly, and I mean this with love, but you either suck it up and win, or you have the cheat meal and lose. You can't expect these. And this is what I would tell your listeners: if you don't want a six-pack or to be shredded, that's okay. But if you do, there's no version of that not sucking. You wanting something for nothing is the dumbest thing ever, in my opinion. And I'm trying to say this with compassion, but this is why I would never hire someone who plays the lottery. And if you're out there and you play the lottery, I apologize. But I wrote an article called The Powerball Mentality. And it's this idea that you want massive rewards for very little effort. That's a losing game. If there's any part of you right now if you're out there listening, that has that mentality of I want high rewards for minimal effort, you're never going to win that game. That's not a deeply meaningful life. I want to earn. I know this sounds crazy, Frank, but I really mean this. I would rather earn $1 million than win $1 million.
100%. I don't think it sounds crazy at all.
I appreciate you. And
because here's why. Now we can, and I don't want to steal this away from you, but I want to interject because, for one, I mean, you talked about keeping promises build self-esteem. I mean, that almost goes exactly in line with keeping promises is how you build self-confidence, which is one of the, major themes of everything that we teach and work here. But from a neuroscience, from a chemical standpoint, inside of our brain, there's this huge buzzword in the porn addiction world with dopamine. Dopamine is our neurotransmitter. It's the reward chemical. But the reward chemical doesn't come in the achievement of the reward. It's not when you get the $1 million, do you get the hit of dopamine. It's actually in the process of getting you there. So it's creating the plan and then executing upon it. And then certain milestones in that journey will you get dopamine. This is why personal growth, this is why self-development, this is why becoming the man that you were created to be or becoming the best version of yourself is a never-ending process that you have to be on for the rest of your life, because the destination never ends. It just has to keep moving further or slightly pivot in the direction that you're going. But if you want to feel good about getting something, if you want to feel good about doing something, you actually have to go through the process of the achievement, because it's in that process when you get that hit of dopamine. So, I mean, what you're speaking to right here, it's backed by neuroscience.
So powerful, man. This is a fire conversation. There's a couple things that I think Kevin and I, what's interesting on the show, he's the tactics guy, and I'm the one who's trying to talk about the deeper understanding. And you really do need both, right? So, but I'm going to go to the deeper understanding side because that's where I love to live. So, one thing that you said there that's powerful is the infinite game versus the finite game. I feel like this is a drastically misunderstood concept. And when I really got this, and again, everything I'm talking about right now, at one point I didn't understand. So I want to remind everyone of that. So I'm not on any high horse here. Trust me, I wish I knew a lot of this stuff earlier, and I'm still learning every day. But, okay, so Kobe Bryant wanted to be the greatest basketball player that he could be. That is an infinite game that genuinely never ends until he chooses to retire. But one basketball game, playing the Raptors in 2001 against, I forget the name, Vince
Carter.
Vince Carter, there you go. Vince Carter, which he talks about. That's one finite game within an infinite game. So a basketball player who doesn't realize they're playing a finite game will get very upset if they lose that game. Whereas Kobe will actually be somewhat excited if he loses, because then he can get better. See, this is why certain people succeed in the long run and others don't, is because they're not playing finite games. If this interview doesn't go well, I'm going to review it. I'm going to ask you for it. I'm going to listen to it, and then I'm going to figure out what didn't go well so that I can get better. And I turn a thing that seemed to suck, and it was painful after it if I didn't do well, into something positive. Energy is not created nor destroyed. It's only transformed or transmuted or transferred. So I'm going to take the emotional energy of, Alan, your ego flared there. You didn't really say the things you wanted to say. You didn't get across what you wanted to get across. I'm going to say, okay, Alan, if I'm in pain and I don't feel well about that rep, what am I going to do? I'm going to go review it. And then I'm going to figure out what I want to do better next time. And then I'm going to feel good about that. So I'm going to take a negative emotion and transform it into a positive one, not just for my own personal growth, but because that will help others grow as well. I'm playing an infinite game. If I lose this month, that doesn't mean I lose in general. And I think that deeper understanding is going to shift the paradigm for everyone out there who's waiting for that quick fix or the 6-minute abs or the other solicitations on your attention that are really just BS.
Wow. I don't think there's been a moment that I've been this speechless. So that is just so incredibly powerful right there. So PMES, did we get everything we needed out of the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual? Because I feel like we took a slight diversion into that truth bomb there, but
your intuition's on point. There's more there.
okay, then let's pick it back up there.
Okay, so the best way I can describe the PMES system, and it's probably the worst acronym ever because of PMS. Kind of sounds like penis if you say it too quickly, but whatever. It's the PMES system. So the best way I can describe this is P is the physical, M is the mental, E is the emotional, S is the spiritual. We get that. Spiritual is actually your imagination. So think of the S as your imagination. Okay. Think of E as your feelings. How do you feel? Think of M as like strategic. And then think of P as taking action. Okay. Now, the best way I can describe this, I call it manifestation and the purple elephant. I gave a speech one time and they're like, what does that mean? And so right now, for your listeners, if you're not driving, close your eyes and bear with me here. Okay. I want you to imagination, S, a purple elephant with a cowboy hat on and a double barrel shotgun. Okay. Now, I have my own unique flavor of that purple elephant, and so do you. That only exists in the spiritual world. That only exists in my imagination. Okay? Now, I'm going to emotionalize that, and I'm going to customize it and say, well, how does this elephant make me feel? Okay. Awesome. This is my purple elephant. Cool. M, I'm going to strategize. How can I make this real? Well, I could get crayons or colored pencils. I could draw this thing. And then I'm going to draw it. I'm going to take physical action. I'm going to draw it. Now, the skill gap, what if I'm terrible at drawing? It's not going to be great. But I took something that only exists in the imagination and I put it into the physical reality. Have you ever heard of Barney? Every single thing that's man-made around us was at one point only in someone's imagination. And so when we hear the word manifestation, we're like, law of attraction, woo-woo. No. It's actually scientific. Can you take something in your imagination, emotionalize it, strategize about how to create it, and then take action? And then when you take action, does that result reinforce your belief in what you imagined originally? And if it does, it will snowball. And like if I took the iPhone that Steve Jobs at one point just imagined 1,000 songs in your pocket, and I gave you the very first iPhone, and I compared it to everyone's iPhone right now, you'd think it was the biggest piece of crap in the world. What was once a revolutionary breakthrough that changed the world is now the biggest piece of crap in the world because every single year they've made it better and better and better and better. And not only did Apple make it better, but the whole world and the growth of technology in general made every piece of it better. And so that thing that was imagined originally is being consistently reimagined. And to me, that's how you manifest your dreams. Kevin has a fire quote he might have said on his episode, and it's the best quote he has. No matter what other quotes he likes, this is the best one he has. And
nobody tell Kevin.
Yeah, nobody tell Kevin. It's your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold on to the longest. And so one thing that I'll say here too, and I know that you grew up in foster care, and I think that we were given a blessing with our adversity. Because when the present is painful and the past is painful, you have no choice but to go into the future just to escape. I didn't realize this at the time, but in hindsight, I have vision, and I always have, man. I often say this, no matter how painful today is or how painful yesterday was, I always have a bright future. Like, I have the brightest future ever, man. And it's like a feeling, so I don't want that to sound egotistical. And it's a spotless future. Everyone listening right now, you have a spotless future. And you can take the manifestation formula that I just gave you, and you can imagine a new future, and then start to consistently and sustainably emotionalize it, strategize about it, take action. But remember, you're playing an infinite game. You're never going to get to a place where it's like, oh, I'm done now. It's an infinite game, and it's the best game in the world because it's the game of life. It's a beautiful thing. And hopefully that landed for people. But if you struggle with vision, they actually did a study where they hooked people up to fMRIs. And that some people could envision 10 years in the future. And I genuinely believe that I can do that. I'll have these random impressions of myself. I was folding laundry a few months ago, and I remember literally seeing myself in 10 years. Like, it's like it's like an impression. It's not like I know the vivid details, but it's like boom, and I know the feeling. It's like an emotionalized impression. And it's like, oh wow, that's gonna be awesome. And I don't know if that's normal. Kevin says that's not normal. When I told him about it, he's like, that's not normal, Alan. I'm like, okay. And he's like, because I asked him, do you have that? And he said, no, I don't. What they found is hooking people up to fMRI, and they asked people to envision their future. They found that some people were envisioning a stranger if you go too far into the future. And so if you've ever played chess, you know it's the person who can think 15 moves ahead that's going to win the chess game. And a lot of life is kind of like that, unfortunately, for people who don't. But I think it's a muscle. I think it's something you can train. I believe I trained it through adversity growing up because I always went into the future to escape my present. And I think that you can start training it today. So ask yourself, where do I want to be in 3 months? Where do I want to be in 6 months? Where do I want to be in a year? When it starts to get uncomfortable, stick with it. Try to do it. Maybe don't do a decade. For me, I do the day and the decade. So whatever today, it's leading me to the decade I want. And to be completely frank, I'm actually doing way more than that. It's actually in a vision 40, 50 years. You know, my goal is to live to 120. I don't want to get into any of that. But for anyone listening, do you live a vision-centered life where your future is getting consistently brighter and brighter and brighter, and that you're proud of yourself and your present working toward that? Or are you escaping your present? Because virtue and vice, when you're in emotional pain is guaranteed. You're going to have emotional pain. I'm going to have emotional pain. Later tonight, I could get a text that my girlfriend's upset with me, and I'll be in emotional pain. What do I do with the emotional pain? Do I use the emotional pain to learn something new and get better and treat her even more? Something I'm proud of? Or do I use the emotional pain to go into a vice like Netflix or alcohol or drugs or porn? And again, I had an alcohol challenge, and that was my old vice. That was my escape. That was almost kind of letting me off the hook of those visions of like, that was when I was fully present and didn't worry about the future. And I didn't realize, but I was using it as a crutch of not leaning into my own personal development. And when I quit drinking, it took me a long time. It took me 5 years to quit drinking, but I did it. And right now, I actually did my flashcard. I have critical numbers. I'm almost 500 days sober, man, as of yesterday.
Amazing. Congratulations, bro. I don't think I knew that part about your story. I mean, obviously that speaks and resonates pretty deeply with, you know, a lot of our listeners and very closely with the work that we're doing. And for any of you guys out there that are struggling with how to write a vision for your life, I think it was episode 19. So go back towards the beginning of the year. I think it was early January. One of the first episodes we did in January actually was episode 18. I did a 15-minute talk on how to paint a vision for the future, because that sits really at the core of everything that I do professionally. You know, outside of the podcast, I mean, the work with the porn addiction coaching, I mean, that is probably the second most important thing to rebooting or overcoming your addiction to porn, is having a vision or having a plan. When I talked with Dr. Trish, the neuroscientist, a few episodes back, she talked about just having a plan for tomorrow. But I teach go 5 years in the future, take 5 years, write it to one. So where do you need to be 1 year to be on target for 5 years? Once you got the 1 year, where do you need to be 3 to 4 months from now? And then from there, what's the one thing you need to do right now to start that process? Because having a vision that's like the first step. It doesn't actually mean anything until you take that first step, until you take an action to at least get that process going. So we'll go 5 years, but then we bring it all the way down to right now. What do you do right now to be the first step to create the vision for your life 5 years down the road from now? So I think the audience will resonate pretty deeply with that piece there.
Frank, not to interrupt you, but what was the first most important thing? You said vision was the second most important. I'm just curious.
Stopping watching porn.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna reboot, if you're actually gonna rewire your brain, you got to stop with consuming the pornography. So I think that's literally like our first call. Like, we make a declaration, like, from this day on, like, you're never gonna consume it. And you think that would be pretty basic, but I think it's actually like, it's in that moment of decision. You know, Tony Robbins, we've talked about him pretty extensively on today's show. I mean, he talks about the physiological change that occurs within the body when you actually make a decision, not just thinking about an idea, but making the decision and then taking that first step. So step number 1 would be just stop consuming it. Step number 2, build a plan, and then execute upon it. But that's getting too kind of detailed on what I do. Take a slight pivot with you here, and let's talk relationships if we can for 5 minutes or so, because I think we had Anthony Trucks on. I know you're familiar with Anthony a couple weeks back, and I mean his journey, and getting cheated on, and then ultimately getting back with his wife, and now they're just in an incredible place. So he had a really great kind of perspective to share on dealing with some trauma. But we were talking beforehand about just some of the things that your girlfriend has really taught you. So just share with me kind of what's on your heart from the relationship side. I'll just let you speak to the men and women. 20% women right here, and I think there'll be something in here for both of them. So yeah, just share with me what you've really learned over this last year of being with your girl.
So yeah, I appreciate that question, man. So first and foremost, Anthony Trucks is a close friend of mine. He's such a good dude. Couldn't speak
Amazing.
more highly of him. Such an awesome guy, just all around, and definitely embodies, in my opinion, a lot of the virtue that is a great man. But to talk about relationships in general and what I've kind of learned, and that's what's been on my heart a lot lately, is because I'm always growing and evolving, and I, study, practice, teach. This is what I'm studying, what I'm practicing in my own life, and what I'm sort of about to try to kind of teach here. So my girlfriend and I started something called Relationship Talks 7 weeks ago. We're about to be on our 8th week tomorrow. And what we're doing is we're helping married couples and even people that are solo but trying to improve their relationship with themselves or trying to attract their dream partner, understand relationships at a deeper level. And so a lot of this is what she's taught me. But basically, one thing I think I can bring to your listeners is that everything's a relationship. And what I mean by that is I have a relationship with my father's death. I have a relationship with whether or not I like my haircut right now. I have a relationship with how I dress. I have a relationship with whether or not I like my physical appearance or my physique. I have a relationship with food. I was a fitness coach for a long time, and I know you're big into fitness, and a lot of your listeners are too. Some people's relationship with food is so toxic. And I've been there. But the only difference that I've noticed is some people use food as the fuel to achieve the physique they want. Other people get used by food.
Mhm.
I feel like calories are also similar to like cash flow as well with your finances. I know you have the 5 F's, right? Faith, family, finances, fitness, and
Freedom.
freedom. Freedom. And so you have a relationship with all the words I just said. Is it a positive relationship or is it a negative one? And I don't know if you've ever heard of John Gottman's work with the bids, but basically what he found is that he could take 15 minutes of watching a couple together and predict with a very high percent accuracy, and don't quote me on this, but he can predict with very high percent accuracy whether or not that couple would stay together based on bids. What a bid is if I say, "Hey Frank, how are you, man?" and you say, "I'm awesome, brother. How are you?" That's a positive response. If I say, "Hey Frank, how are you, brother?" and you say, "Alan, you're the worst," that's a negative bid. Although in a way it's positive because you actually responded to me. But have you ever put your hand up and went for a high five and you just got nothing? And all right, cool. It doesn't feel good, right? It's like, oh, that was a negative bid. So that association, and I'll tell a super quick story here. Used to have bad challenges with allergies. I used to get these allergy shots, right? And I was allergic to dust mites and cats and all this stuff. And then eventually I was like, okay, we went up to this clinic in New Hampshire, and all they did was they took a computer, found out what I was allergic to. In other words, what my central nervous system had a negative response to. Because for those of you who don't know what an allergy is it's basically your immune system's overreaction to something that's not actually deadly. So if you had a traumatic incident with bees when you were growing up, maybe you became allergic to bees, that kind of thing. So anyways, I went to this clinic. All they did, man, they hooked me up to the computer and they sent signals into my central nervous system that represent dust mites. And then they stimulated my spine with this massager to teach my central nervous system that it's okay. Now, the reason I tell you that story is that that's what's happening all day, every day. I have a relationship with self-discipline. I have a relationship with books. I have a relationship with whether or not I like audiobooks better than regular books. Everything's a relationship, but do we understand our relationship enough to create positive bids? And it goes deeper too. So what John Gottman says is that if you have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive bids to negative bids, that's a positive relationship. So if you and I have a 5-to-1 ratio, we're going to feel good about each other moving forward. And I believe we do. He said what extraordinary relationships do is 20-to-1. What ridiculously extraordinary relationships do is 100-to-1. And that's the rarest. And here's why. If you have one negative bid with your intimate partner, that means you need 100 to get back to even. Right? And so, if you have 4 negative bids for every 400 positive bids with your partner, that means there's very little bickering and all that kind of stuff. But let me give this an example that's down to earth. So my girlfriend and I have something called check-ins, where bi-weekly we go through the 6 human needs that Tony Robbins has: certainty and security, uncertainty/variety, significance, love and connection, growth, and then contribution. Those are the 6 needs. And the 7th one is sex and intimacy. We go through each and we review the weeks prior, and we say, okay, how well did you meet from 0 to 10 my need for certainty, and vice versa. We do it with each other. We do a bunch of positives and then 1 improvement. And so what we're doing is those improvements are like, so one of the ones that she said, I asked her this question. We also have questions we ask each other. One of them is there anything about our relationship that feels even slightly misaligned for you, even if you wish it didn't bother you, it still kind of does? Something along those lines. She said, well, when you get out of the shower, sometimes you leave the bath mat. And again, this is a poor representation of her, because she very rarely is frustrated by any of those kind of things. But she basically mentioned that. And if I didn't ask the question, that would have just gone under the radar probably forever, because she probably felt guilty to even tell me that, because she doesn't want to nag or anything like that. The point is this: that one negative bid helped solve thousands of negative bids in the future, because when we live together, and she's my future wife and I intend on that, that's a good example of have the tough conversation now to realign together, to make sure you're growing together rather than apart. But I think the understanding of your relationship with your spouse or partner, your relationship with your friends and family, your relationship to money, your relationship to the gym. I remember I had this one fitness client, and then we'll wrap up here in terms of this answer. I had this one fitness client, man, and he literally said, I asked him, what's your dream physique? Because I want to help him with the vision. I want him to put it on his phone background. I had Greg Plitt on my background. You know who Greg Plitt is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course you do. So, and I manifested that physique in certain regards. But he chose a physique. You know who Sadiq is?
Of course.
Of course you know Sadiq. Okay, so he chose Sadiq's. Okay. Now, this guy, and I need to be frank in coaching. You're a coach. You understand. Your job is to tell what you believe the truth is. He said, well, I love that physique, and I want to achieve this physique, but I don't really like weight training. Right. And I said, okay, I mean this with love, then forget it. From my understanding, there's no possibility you can achieve a physique like that without weight training. That's not how it works. And so I think that's a good example of his relationship with weight training will forever be the bottleneck to him manifesting his dream, unless he can learn how to like weight training. And what I told him was this: I said, there's things right now that you probably hated at first that you learned to love. Just like over time, some of the people listening probably learned to like porn. Now they're unlearning that, because they see the compound effect and the negatives coming back. We all are learning and unlearning every day, all day. We're all evolving. The question is, are we doing it consciously, and are we doing it intentionally? And so I think the relationships piece here is everything's a relationship. And when you become hyper conscious of what that relationship is, whether it's positive or negative, now you can take control of the process, and you won't feel like a slave to it.
Yeah. So just real quick, just adding on top of that, I mean, just getting back to the neuroscience once again, I mean, what fires together wires together. So realizing in your relationship, how you think about a particular person, how you think about a particular physique, how you think about particular incidents, just in that thought, there's a chemical wiring taking place, chemical firing taking place. And when you associate the two, you're literally developing the neural pathways or the neural connections that at one point will become unconscious to you, that you don't even realize that they are there. So, bro, I could talk to you for hours. I knew this was going to be just an incredible conversation prior to getting on. We're probably going to have you back on. Maybe we'll get you and Kevin on together. I think that could be an interesting kind of three-way conversation. If you guys are open for that, I think I actually want to set something like that up and just maybe we'll make that just kind of a roundtable discussion type of thing. I don't know if you guys would be up for that. So coming towards the end of the hour here, you've just shared so much incredible just insight, perspective, wisdom for people. I mean, for such a young man, you have an incredible future, man. I really see you in like 20 years from now. I mean, you're already there. You're already impacting and changing so many people's lives. But I think this is like the warm up for like what you're ultimately going to be doing. I mean, there's a handful of people like in our space that I make sure that I get like my weekly dose of them. I mean, at one point it was Tony. I've kind of grown and evolved from some of Tony's content over the last few years. But you know, guys like Ed, Milet, guys like Patrick Bet-David, just guys that are operating on a different level. And I see something like that for you. Like millions of people will know the name Alan Lazaros. So I'm incredibly honored to have had you on here today. I just very appreciative for everything that you're doing, man. I'm so grateful for you. So as we wrap up every time, obviously we want to give you the chance to plug what you're working on, what you're most excited, the podcast, the coaching, tell the listeners where they can find you, where they can hang out with Alan. You know, just where's the best place to connect with you. If they like what they heard, if you don't like what Alan said today, don't reach out to him. Don't follow up. There's no point in doing that. But if you're still here with us and you're enjoying what he shared with us, where can they hear more of what you're putting out in the world?
First, I just want to say thank you. That meant the world to me. What you just said, I can tell a sincere compliment when I see it. And it's important, I think, to you can't want that external validation or need it, but it's nice. And I really appreciate your support and your belief in me, because that's not always been the case in terms of the people in my life. And I just really appreciate what you just said. And you know, I recognize you as someone who I know will continue to have a major impact as well. And I think that, for lack of better phrasing, you know, game recognizes game in that sense of like, you're dedicated, you have high standards for yourself, you're setting a standard for your community, and it's beautiful. It's honestly awesome, because there's a lot of really unsavory things we could be doing with our time on a Friday, and we're choosing to choose the light and not the dark. And to me, that's just awesome. So I want to commend you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. And I really appreciate your kind word.
I meant that, man. And I haven't had this, you know, in preparing for this. I had to catch myself in preparation from not, I had to catch myself of falling out of work mode. You're preparing to interview this person. I was just enjoying consuming what you were sharing. Like, you know, I always go back and I try to listen to as many podcasts as possible. And I always try to frame it like, okay, awesome point there. How can I bridge this and build this? I was literally sitting there, like just consuming, taking notes for my own self. So, I mean, I truly meant that. And I haven't really had that with anybody else on the show. Not that people on the show aren't going to go on to do amazing things, but there's truly something special about what you're putting out in the world, Alan. So I appreciate you.
I really appreciate that, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just got the chills. Okay, so if you're out there listening and you did enjoy my flavor of personal development and my perspective, you can find us at Next Level University. You can go to www.nextleveluniverse.com. Eventually, Frank, we want to have an entire online campus. You know, for me, education has really given me opportunities that a lot of the people I grew up with don't have. And the access to the community of next level people that really are trying to aspire. You know, I think we've all slipped into vice at times, but if you have aspiration and a bright future and you're focused on your potential, it will help pull you out of that darkness, I believe. And I think that's a very common denominator that I've seen growing up. It's like the people who aspired to greater always found a way. Those who kind of didn't believe in themselves and didn't aspire to greater tended to fall into whatever path life, you know, their environment set for them. So if you're interested, you can reach out on Instagram at alazarus88, ALAZAROS88. I try to get back to everyone between my assistant and myself, of course. And if any of this resonated, please reach out. I absolutely adore hearing from people that I've made a positive impact, even if it's small. The tiniest tweak can make the biggest difference in the long term. And I think that that's why we do what we do. And I've been on the other end listening to podcasts where it changed my life, and I understand the impact and I take it very seriously. So I love to hear that. It fuels my fire.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and guys, we'll plug and link all of his contact and his site, his podcast, his Instagram down there in the show notes below. I know we're pressed here. I got one final question we wrap up every interview with. Obviously, the show is titled The Superhuman Life. It's really been a result of my transformational story and journey. And for me, living Superhuman Life is really about it's about a belief system. It's about understanding that we were created for a specific purpose, and when we set our intention to move us closer to that vision every single day, or move us closer to that purpose that we were created for, then ultimately we're living a superhuman life. But I like to ask the guests at the end of every show, how would Alan Lazaros define living a superhuman life?
Fire question. So I'm going to take my time on this one. I'll tell a brief story because this is, I think, the most powerful thing that I can say to anyone who is listening. This is a hypothetical story, okay? And let's really put ourselves there because things like this do happen. There's a mother in the park with her 2-year-old son, and she gets distracted and she sees an old friend and she's talking to her. The 2-year-old recently learned to crawl, and he's an adventurous little boy. And this almost happened to me, by the way. And the 2-year-old crawls into the street, gets hit by a car, and is killed, okay? Tragic. There's 3 people, human beings in this scenario, that have influence over the outcome, that tragedy. There's the driver of the car, there's the mother, and there's the 2-year-old. And we could debate semantics all day, whether or not it was the mother who should have been paying attention, or the driver who should have been paying attention, or just freak things happen. But here's what I know for sure. It's not the 2-year-old's fault. And the reason why is because the 2-year-old was not aware that cars are dangerous. And if you listen to this episode, you are now aware of things that you weren't before, and you have a responsibility to make better choices. There's no more empowering thought, in my opinion, than you have a spotless future. So do I, so do you. And from this moment on, we can start making better choices. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be done growing. But from this moment on, you can always better your best. Do your best, reflect on it, get better. Do your best, reflect on it, get better. That's the only way I've learned how to crawl out of my darkest places. And what you think is your darkest moment actually can be your greatest if you use it to learn and better your best. And, if you do have guilt or shame around any negative choices, or you've hurt someone, or you've done something, or you've made a mistake, we all make mistakes. Mistakes are proof you're trying. Not all of us better our best, though. Everyone does their best. Not everyone betters their best. And that's the last thing I would say is make positive choices from here on out with this new awareness. Don't just listen to this to listen to it.
So good. So good. Nothing to add there, guys. Brother, we appreciate you so much for everything that you're doing. Appreciate you for opening up, sharing some things I don't think you've shared anywhere else here today. I truly do appreciate your vulnerability there. But guys, you heard it here with Alan. Make your better best. Make your best better. Make your better best. But that's it, guys. I mean, there's so much. This is one of those ones you listen again, and you listen again a third time and take notes. But this was incredible. Alan, I appreciate you. I know you got to run. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't done so yet, you want to help us continue to grow, obviously you can do that in 2 ways. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you are listening to. But most importantly, if you know somebody in your life that needs to hear today's message, you need to hear the conversation with Alan, or needs to hear any of the conversations we've had up until this point, the best thing you can do for that person is sharing this podcast with them. So we appreciate you guys for tuning in. For Alan, Frank, Rich, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.